Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Justin Wolf from Systicon North America. We're proud to sponsor this event today. As I look around and walk around today, I could see I'm not the only one who shrank in the closet over the last year and a half. But it's good to see everyone face to face. Systicon is a provider of predictive analytics software that allows us to understand that cost, capability, and readiness trade space. So we think it's really applicable to the panel today. Really excited to have such an esteemed panel of guests and looking forward to what they have to say. Thanks you all for joining, and feel free to visit us down at booth 1657. Thanks so much.
No, I took mine. Okay, well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Lydon. I'm going to be your moderator today. Several years ago, I was sitting in the position of the gentleman to my left, and I've been out for a little bit, so I'm kind of feeling old with these characters to my left here, but it's a very distinguished panel, and I'm delighted to be here with them today. Just a quick introduction. Immediately to my left, Rear Admiral Pete Stamatopoulos, the commander of Naval Supply Systems Command and 49th Chief of the Supply Corps. And to his left is Mr. Tony Mathis, President and CEO of GE Edison Works. And to his left is Rear Admiral Ed Anderson, the Deputy Commander of Undersea Warfare at NAVSEA. And then finally, completing our panel is Admiral John Meyer, the Commander of the Naval Air Forces Atlantic. So just a great group today. And a quick admin, I think by now everybody should have the process to fill out the note cards. If you have questions, and just raise your hand and they'll pick them up and bring them up here. So no microphones, you'll only be coming up on the cards if that's what you'd like to do. So topic, Naval Sustainment, where did it come from? What is it? And then what's this supply one that we're talking about this afternoon? I guess the best way to kick this off is just give you a little bit of background for those of you that don't know where NSS came from. And then we'll get to the supply in just a minute. And the best way to do that is, the VCNO, Bill Lesher commissioned 3 sustainments or naval sustainment system groups or studies during his tenure. And I'd like to just read his release so I give you his words on what he's trying to do with this. And he says, why is the Navy implementing NSS? And what's the goal of NSS? And the Naval Sustainment System is the Navy approach to generating step change improvements in readiness. And those of you that have been going to the sessions, you know that readiness is number 2. Columbia, readiness, capability and capacity going through. So NSS uses data and analytics to identify the key drivers of performance in a given area, and we'll have one of those today. And then business practices are applied to make permanent changes in how the Navy modernizes, maintains, operates, mans, trains, supports the force to achieve lasting increases in readiness. And through NSS, data and analytics are used to continuously reevaluate performance and project future performance. And with a goal of cementing gains, very important, and creating a culture of continuous improvement and accountability. Quite an ambition. And we'll talk about that. So NSS Aviation was the first of those. It came first, largely from former Secretary Mattis's challenge to bring up the F-18 readiness. Next up came the Naval Sustainment System Shipyard. And then finally, last October, the VCNO commissioned this one, Naval Sustainment System Supply. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the panelists for a little bit of an introduction from each of them first, and we'll try to get an idea of what's the urgency in each of these areas. We've got industry, we've got in the industrial sector, we've got the fleet, and we've got the logistics side. So what's the urgency here? And first up will be, again, Admiral Stamatopoulos. I mentioned Commander of NAVSUP, 49th Chief of Supply Corps. He's a career Supply Corps officer and logistician. He's very proud of that piece of it there. And he's deployed on the whole range or gambit from submarines to amphib ships to carriers and that. His operational staff experience is very broad that he brings to the job. And finally, as a flag officer, he's been the supply officer down at the Fleet Forces Command. He's been N41, the CNO supply officer, and then also UCOM, and he's the only person I know that decided to leave UCOM after only 1 year, but he did so to get into his current job. So, Admiral, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Admiral Light. And number 45, and as I look out into the audience there, I also see 48 and I see 43, and there might be other former commanders of the Naval Supply Systems Command, which is really fun because we have a very close, tight-knit community across the Navy Supply Corps, about 2,200 Supply Corps officers, give or take a few, and we do have a very comprehensive view of our end-to-end supply chains, from the tactical edge up through the operational level of war, all the way into the force generation or the foundry, where we get ready forces, and then up into deep into the supply chains, into our hardware systems commands, our PEOs, program offices, and then of course we touch the industrial base. So thanks for the intro. You hit it perfectly with Admiral Lesher's thoughts on this. And then I also like to quickly thank the Navy League for featuring NSS-Supply. This is a first for NAVSUP to be able to come before this group and talk about these end-to-end supply chains that are very, very important to us. And as you heard yesterday from the CNO, the things that he's laying out in front of us to be able to get after our readiness, which is a very present value, day one priority for us within the sustainment world, and then also how we're going to get after our lethality, which is both a present value, got to have ready forces, but it's also a future value to our joint force out there. And so he's laid a very good path for us, and this NSS effort, all of them together, help to deliver that. And so as we look at our NSS supply, what's really fun about this is that it's now elevated end-to-end supply chain management into the C-suite, up at the highest levels, with 4-star oversight from all of our 4-stars across the Navy, our fleet commanders, Admiral Codwell and NR, and others that we have throughout the Navy. And they're really taking a very active role in our supply chains as they pertain not just to supplies, but as they move throughout the space into the maintenance worlds that we have in both our organic and stretching into the commercial relationships that we have with our partners. And thank you, Tony, for joining us here today. So it's a good time to be in the Supply Corps, good time to be in Navy sustainment. So what's really different about this? Well, the first thing that's really different about how we've done things in the past is that now we have a single, accountable, responsible office or officer, if you will, the Naval Supply Systems Command, to integrate our supply chains end to end, and that's a big difference. And what was a little bit different about this than in the past is that the CNO and the VCNO has designated NAVSUP as the supported commander. And although I support every single day all of our mission partners, it kind of turns this around a little bit, and then we have 11 supporting commanders, of which 6 are 3-stars. And it really just shows you one of the themes of this Navy League event these 3 days is integration. And it really talks to the seriousness of how we have to integrate, synchronize, and coordinate our supply chains across a ginormous field out there, an operating environment which we operate in. And today, to my left, are a couple of our supporting commanders, which you're going to get to hear from firsthand. And then also, for those of you that happen to go to the congressional breakfast this morning, you heard from Admiral Gumbleton and his perspective, and he is also a supporting commander with respect to our financial management, which is obviously key to making sure that our supply chains are operating good. We view our supply chains as strategic platforms. There's no doubt about it. And it was, many years ago when the commercial industry recognized this, and it is commonplace now for supply chains to be elevated into the C-suite. Well, that's what we're doing here, again, for the first time. And when you think about that, we have a very, very broad and diverse supply chain spanning from the nuclear enterprise, aircraft carriers, submarines, surface ships, aviation, expeditionary platforms. And those are very different from one another. However, although there are differences, there are many common supply chain themes that run across all of those together. And that by doing a better job of kind of coordinating, and I said, integrating, synchronizing up and down that supply chain, from the tactical edge, which we see in the fleet, all the way up into our program offices and PEOs, there's things that happen upstream that you all know have downstream consequences to them. And so this effort is just a more focused, deliberate, 4-star level engagement of being able to coordinate. And again, as we mentioned before, this is really about our ability to leverage data that we have access to be able to break down barriers, to be able to look deep inside our repair activities, the organic repair activities, which that's new ground for us, to really share information across shipyards, across our regional maintenance centers, our warfare centers on the maritime side, and including in our FRCs, to be able to really dissect what's happening in those very diverse operations, if you will, activities, and to make sure that we have the investments aligned properly as well inside that space, to be able to get the best value out of our supply chains that we do. So many, many great things here, and I look forward to talking with you about it. But up, I think on the screen, if you go to one of the slides, you'll see our supply. Do you have the slide that you go? The one with, yep, there it is right there. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So this is the NSS and how we've kind of organized ourselves right now around 6 pillars. And those pillars are really just the beginning. And this NSS effort is a 5-year effort. We have about 15 waves planned over 5 years, 75 initiatives, and we've just now started wave 2. So in our wave 1 and our early waves, we're really setting the conditions to really make for healthy, sustainable, and affordable supply chains that give us the performance that we need to get. Demand management, we've done many things in the past to look at demand management, but we haven't approached it this way. We're using a lot of commercial best practices. How can we effectuate better maintenance practices? How can we do reliability control in a different way than we've done it before to be able to get some changes? And how do we have feedback loops into the supply chain so that we can make better buying decisions as opposed to just buying more stuff? You know, really concentrating on the repair of our repairables and how we can get more utilization out of those repairs. How we can decrease turnaround times, which is a big effort for us right now as we start off into this. Because the longer length in our repairs, that means the longer supply chains have to be, if you will, and the more material that we have to buy to be able to support the warfighter. Our working capital fund, you all in commercial industry understand how cash flow is so important to you. Well, we've taken a completely different approach to managing cash, and that is we're taking a cash approach to that. Not a traditional way of looking at our military financial management as taking a cash from a collections, disbursements perspective. But doing that really opened up a lot of eyes for us, and we saw things that we couldn't see before, which is making us better managers, financial managers, and we're bringing better governance to a very complex financial system out there. Remember, our Navy working capital fund is about $38 billion worth of assets inside there, many of which are ready for issue, many are not ready for issue. Many are in your facilities being repaired commercially, many are in organic. How are we managing that and making sure that balance, that shelf health is good? We've never looked at cost of goods sold from the standpoint of how much does it cost to make our really repairs? And what does it mean to have a return on investment in sustainment? It's always been elusive. Before we buy more parts, before we buy more things, what's the return on investment? That's been hard to find. Well, we've come up with a commercial best practice called a CFOM, a Supply Effectiveness Figure of Merit, which we've taken from Caterpillar, who happens to be on the floor. So if you're interested in a CFOM, Caterpillar uses it. But it allows us to monetize the value of readiness for the entire fleet of F-18s or the entire fleet of E-2s or the entire DDG force or submarines. And it's a different way of looking at things. And it's as I said, it's a figure of merit. It helps us understand for every dollar that we invest, either organically in our repair activities, to include shipyards, or the amount that we pay for commercial providers, to the size and scope of our inventory relative to the asset base that we have and the service life of those assets. What does that picture look like, and how much readiness are we getting out of that investment? So this is a completely exciting new way of looking at things and doing business. And again, it takes all of us working together, being all in all the time, and having these 11 support team commanders from the aviation, subsurface, surface community makes this really exciting to be able to understand each other better, and representing commercial industry, Tony, really forging better supplier relationships, okay, to understand what your challenges are within your areas of expertise and how we might do things better together in the future to be able to gain the affordability that we need and the performance that we need. So with that, I'll stop there and look forward to any questions that may come up as we go.
Super. Yeah, I
Thanks.
think that was a great overview, so thank you. Next, I'm going to jump to the other side of the table to Admiral John Meyer, and I'll introduce him, Naval Academy Class of '86, and career aviator in the VAQ community, tremendous billets ashore, commanded VAQ 136 and Gunston Hall, LSD 41. Flag officer down at PERS 4 at Navy Personnel Command, and the commander of the Navy Warfare Development Center. So, Admiral, over to you, sir.
You caught me off guard, Admiral Iden. I was anticipating this long run-up and then just being very brief and getting into the question period. Today's topic really reminds me of the old adage that amateurs speak tactics and professionals speak logistics, and many of the logisticians and supply corps personnel here certainly understand that. I do find it interesting, Pete, when you talk about supporting supported, and I'll just go back to that. So this NSS started with NSS Aviation, and it was a long path. We're about 3 years into that path. It really started with the F-18, again with General Mattis's guidance or challenge really to DoD to improve the material condition of our aircraft. In that process, there was a similar slide, similar to the pillars that are in NSS-Supply, but for aviation, those were O-level reforms, so reform at the deck plate levels, FRC, so our readiness centers, our depot level maintenance, engineering level reform, also governance, a whole lot of analytics that go under that, but a fundamental aspect of that is the supply level reform. And I would argue out of the supply level reform of NSSA is born this whole new NSS. And I'm here to tell you we have benefited greatly. So I'll keep my comments brief and to questions later if you'd like. But I'm the recipient of tremendous support from the initiatives that have already happened in the supply chain. For those of us in the supply industry or for aviation, we understand AVCAL, which is the volume of parts that you have on hand to support aviation assets. And it's a volume of parts. In the grand scheme, it doesn't mean anything unless the part that I need is in that pile of parts. And the analysis that's been going on in this process, the rigor that goes in to expand the definition of that AVCAL, but it is some of this ability to mine, capture, and utilize the data with these effectiveness metrics that is absolutely driving that. I'm here to tell you in the last 4 aircraft carrier deployments, we have met our mission capable goals 100% of the time on our aircraft carriers. That's pretty impressive. We're not quite there yet on our amphibious readiness groups, but that's the next initiative that we're pushing at Airland, is we're going to drive that same exact material condition expectation all the way down to the deck plates. And I'm here to tell you it absolutely resonates. The biggest aspects of that from my perspective are, do I have the right part on hand when something breaks and I need a part? If I've got it on hand, great. If I don't have it on hand, how quickly can I get that part? So there's this transit time. And some of that clearly depends on where you are in the world. If you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that's harder. So you probably want to have a larger supply of parts and some of those challenges. But it's important to understand, too, that we're not running a business. There are business-like aspects here, but businesses don't necessarily find themselves sailing into harm's way, preparing to fly and operate in a denied environment where I may not be able to get the logistics hit from a supply ship. I may not be able to get the cod hit or the helicopter flight with critical parts. And we've got to be able to repair those things ourselves on time, aggressive. We've got to have the right stuff on the shelves. So there's really a symbiotic relationship of the great support that NSSA continues to get from the Supply Corps and the benefit of all of that data and really driving efficiency and ultimately cost out of our current readiness model. But there's the other reciprocal part where my team is wholly supporting the Supply Corps' efforts in this regard, because that's really where we start to get into driving cost out of the business. Readiness is not just throw money at it. It is an expensive business that we're in, but squeezing efficiency and cost is essential in the current fiscal environment. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today, Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral. It's good to hear about the news on NSS Aviation there. Next up, to his right, Rear Admiral Ed Anderson, the Deputy Commander of Undersea Warfare for NAVSEA, Naval Academy Class of 90, a career submariner, Commander Jefferson City, SSN 759. And interesting enough, qualified for command in United Kingdom submarines as well. Another broad career, and as flag officer down at Personnel Development or Personnel Command in Millington. And most recently before this billet was the commander of the, or deputy commander for fleet readiness at the Space and Warfare Systems Command. I still have trouble saying those new names there, and they change it every 2 years, so it keeps us interesting. But sir, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Mike, and Pete, appreciate being here. It's great to be joining the group today. There's a lot going on, and that's partly why Admiral Galena sends his regrets, and you get to look at me. You know, the whole thing is about supporting warfighter, and Admiral Meyer kind of gave some of the deck plate tip of the spear on that. From NAVSEA's perspective, our number one thing is the on-time delivery of ships and submarines and systems to the fleet. So that takes on an interesting relationship between Naval Sea Systems Command and Naval Supply Systems Command. In particular, the NSS-Supply Material Management Initiative is working hand in glove with NAVSEA's NSS Shipyard to discover the pain points and expose them and define what is not getting material to the shipyards or to the ships to support at sea, to expose those bottlenecks and reduce job delays to the maximum extent possible. So, and when you look at the data, and there's a lot of data, and we're trying to gather and assimilate data and make sense out of it, the diagnostics behind each of those material delays is its own little nugget. So I'm not here to speak about submarine force. I'm here to speak for NAVSEA, but my particular experience in the Undersea Reliability Control Board. So in the truest sense of rip, op, and deploy, we stole from the aviation enterprise, the RCB, from NAE. We stole their algorithm. We tweaked it to suit our very complex platforms. And we have now conducted 14 RCBs. And in doing that, we have discovered that things that we thought were the problem are merely symptoms of the problem. And places where we thought that the supply system was not supporting us, we in fact are not supporting the supply system. So that is the dual relationship, especially between our syscoms. We flop back and forth from supported to supporting, and we got to be clear on which role we're talking from and which role we're asking from. So that material pillar is key in the NSS supply or shipyards and supporting the NSS supply. So the convergence of those two things expose initiatives into common pictures of issues and supporting and being most efficient in solving those material problems. So that's my opening remarks, and appreciate the chance.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, especially the linkage. So finally, as we've done in the other panels, we're very delighted to have an industry anchor here, one of our partners. And today it's Tony Mathis from General Electric. And interesting enough, 9 years in the Air Force, coming right out of college at Clemson there, where he began his career with naval engines or aircraft engines and the whole business of aircraft engineering there. Since 97, he's been with GE Aviation, and since January of this year, he kind of moved out of the engineering roles he's had for years in marketing and supervisor and all those, and he's the president and CEO of what's called General Electric Edison Works, a pretty interesting innovation engine for General Electric there. So he's very, very big over his career in transformation and lean management, black belt, those sort of things. So I think he brings incredible expertise and perspective from industry for the panel today. So Tony, thank you for being here, sir. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Admiral Leyden. So first thing I want to do is just say thanks to Navy League for the opportunity to participate on such an esteemed panel. I'm extremely honored. But before I get into what I'm supposed to talk about, I did want to take a second, if we can put the charts up, and say that I have to start with saying that we greatly appreciate and are very proud of the 70-year relationship we have with the United States Navy. We've got a fleet of over, we support over 5,000 engines across the fleet, and so it's a huge responsibility, and we really appreciate the confidence that the Navy has placed in GE. Having said that, we come in to work every day, and our team understands that job one is to keep them safe and keep them supported, and so this is a very important topic. Now, having said that, as you can imagine, with a fleet this big and a business this big, occasionally we'll have a problem or two, just occasionally. And so what I really want to talk about is how we within the General Electric Company is really trying to drive more of a sense of urgency around supporting our customers and meeting our commitments. And that's what we'll talk about here on the next couple of slides. Only 2 slides, and they're pretty simple. And this is the first. For us, as a part of the transformation of the entire General Electric Company, we are starting with a renewed focus on driving lean and a lean culture. And look, I'm not going to try to preach to anybody here about lean because I'm not an expert. But I can tell you within the framework that we're driving, it starts with embracing problem solving. And not just problem solving, but problem solving tied to root cause, getting to action plans to meet customer commitments. And then we take and ensure that everything we're working on now is looked at through the lens of the customers. And you've gotten a lot of perspective from customers here today. That's the sort of thing that we are intensely focused on, trying to focus on as we go forward. And then finally, we have a fundamental understanding that this is not a destination, it's a journey. And we understand that this is about continuous improvement and continuing to improve every day. And the way we now do it is through Kaizen events, and we do Kaizen events on an ongoing basis. Now, our lean journey has really helped us create a much more sense of urgency. I can tell you fundamentally, I lead and run the business totally different than I did before. And we now start with setting top-level priorities and what we call breakthroughs. And the process we use to do that is called Hoshin-Connery. And that process drives us to focus on understanding what our long-term breakthroughs and objectives are, and not only what they are, but what do we need to be doing tactically every day in order to get to those long-term breakthroughs. And it's been a tremendous help. Now, we've deployed daily management throughout the entire organization. We have daily management meetings at every level. Every day at 9:30 in the morning, I'm on a call with me and all my peers, and we understand what we need to get done that day. Every day, 9:30, none of us miss it. Then we put in place visual management so that everybody understands where we are. And as you can see here in the graphic, This is just a very simple example of how we show to everybody in the business, as a bowler, how we're performing versus our customer commitments, such that everybody knows every day where we are, what's red. We then go focus on the red, put problem-solving teams in place, drive the action plans to turn the reds to green. So that's kind of a little bit about how we're driving more of a sense of urgency to deliver on customer commitments, and I'll turn it back over to Admiral Leyden at this point.
Okay, well, thank you, Tony. Appreciate that, and some great insights on how you folks are addressing this problem here and moving forward. So let's move into some specific questions now, and I'll go back to Admiral Stamatopoulos first, and you've laid out the necessity for and the urgency for this NSS supply. I think you've mentioned it. Over the years, there's been many similar initiatives in that. Not many, but there's been significant similar initiatives there. You talked a little bit about what sets this apart, and I guess really most importantly is what's the key to its success this time? I mean, what's really going to push this one forward and make it do everything that you want it to?
Yeah, thanks. There have been initiatives in the past, and we've gotten great results from some of those initiatives over the course of time. But I think we can all appreciate that it's a very vast environment out there. There are a lot of variables out there, and it's always been a challenge to be able to coordinate and synchronize and govern across this space. So I would say, first and foremost, it has really been the four-star involvement, and at the echelon level, with the NIF that's being put into place, which is really bringing alive the CNO's navigation plan through a variety of metrics across all of the codes on the OpNav staff. In particular, in the N4 code, NSS-Supply factors right into their plan, along with our performance to plan logistics, along with our working capital fund and investments that we make in our spare parts. So at the echelon level, we now have greater synchronization to be able to make sure that we have our operations, our activities, and our investments are aligned with one another. And as that flows down, we have the VCNOs put into place the performance to plan initiative for a variety of enterprises, one of which is logistics, looking at our end-to-end logistics supply chain from the tactical edge out at the fleet, where Admiral Meyer talked about those AVCALs, COSALs, how they are performing out there, all the way back into the force generation area and into the commercial and organic industrial base. That's another thing, monitoring the performance of that. The NSS piece, as we've talked about a little bit. This is the formula of this coming together, but it's really, really important to have the corporate four-star governance over this, in my opinion, because it really drives us. I mean, I have to meet with the 4 stars once a month, all of them, and the other 3 stars, you can imagine the party. It's uncomfortable to be in that situation because we're really discussing very meaty issues. We're embracing the red, we're elevating barriers across all of our enterprises, and then we're trying to drive towards resolution. So the visibility, the transparency is really what has got us, and the data. Think about how us supply folks make your head hurt, right? I've heard that many times from the operators that I've worked for. But looking at this through a data lens, through a cash lens, it allows us to equal the conversation, look at what matters most in terms of data, focus in on it, and then you can take a variety of different tribes, bring them together, and start to affect change. I don't have to be an engineer to understand my piece of the pie. The engineer doesn't have to be a supply to understand his piece of the pie, and we can go after it and hold ourselves accountable. So that's a real big thing. And then also, again, as I mentioned, the supplier relationship management, which is big. One of our pillars is this shape the industrial base, and that's our most aspirational pillar. And I think we all recognize that we need to do a better job within the DoD to be able to take our acquisition programs and our sustainment programs and converge those closer together so that we can give industry more stable demand cycles, to share data with them, to be able to take advantage of new construction procurement contracts, and how we have long-term contractual relationships with one another. and to work those relationships very deep. And it's not necessarily about increasing competition, but it's also for you to help understand where your comparative advantage is and where the comparative advantages of your sub-tier vendors are, to be able to get the most out of the supply chains, and we need your help to be able to do that. So this is an all-in, all effort, and we just have to keep the transparency open, the communications going to sustain this over the long haul.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. So turn into, Rear Admiral Meyer, you represent the fleet today, and the ultimate customer for NSS-Supply. You talked a little bit about it, how your fleet personnel are engaged in this effort, and more importantly for me is, how are you going to determine success of the effort in generating the readiness you need?
Yeah, well, the focus from Air Land and Naval Air Forces is really about generating mission-capable aircraft, the aircraft that we need to be able to fly, fight, win, but also to produce new pilots, but it also is tied to our aircraft carrier readiness as well. And those are the two principal aspects. The ultimate outcome that we measure for that in terms of aircraft is the output would be mission-capable aircraft. And we also track fully mission-capable aircraft. Since we've started the NSS Aviation Initiative, we've made substantial improvements. Matter of fact, we hit the threshold of the 80% threshold for Rhinos first. That was the first aircraft that we started. We hold that today with a little bit of variation here and there. We expanded into Growlers. We're now doing P-8s, H-60s. P-8s are probably our greatest success story as we're meeting not only full mission capable and partial mission capable. We've exceeded those levels for the P-8, and it's really an impressive aspect. The E2 community started after that, and the E2 mission capable rate doubled in about 2.5 months. And that doubling was really, so perhaps a little bit of a follow-on to Pete's answer, that old adage of that which interests my boss fascinates me. So when the 4-star VCNO down and in is driving some of this, that really has energized the entire system. That's necessary to an extent because of this supported relationship. The C2, the command and control, the lines by which the organization operates, they don't really connect until you get up to that highest level at the VCNO level, and drives that. But the E2 community responded incredibly fast. Another point was made earlier about whether is it a symptom of a supply chain issue or is it a deeper issue that gets into the engineering aspect? And I think the E2D community is a perfect example. While we very, very rapidly improved our mission capable rates, we have run into some challenges on the fully mission capable rates. And the issue there on the surface, it looks like it is a non-mission capable or partial mission capable supply issue. But when some components only work at 1/10 of what the engineering analysis says those components should be, that's really where the reliability control board comes in and now drills down and identifies those parts. Well, yeah, the reliability of this component has caused a supply chain problem because we expected them to last for 10,000 hours on wing and they only last 1,000. Uncovering those issues, that's really the way ahead. And I will tell you, since NSS-Supply has taken over, some of the initiatives like the end-to-end velocity, which is a huge success story right out of the gate, has made a dramatic improvement in the number of NINs, the parts that we have on. I mean, it's been a prime driver. I think some of the fundamental work was done in aviation, but now you're expanding that across all of the communities. But it is that piece in and of itself that's given the supply chain the responsiveness that we need. And then last point I'd make to that is this is not just Navy aviation, it is naval. And really excited about the prospect and the work that's going on right now as we expand into the MV-22 series, which is Navy, Marine Corps. And if the Air Force comes, it's also a joint opportunity for us to drive our best practices.
Okay, super, thank you. A point?
Yeah, you made some excellent points here, and to further illustrate, the power of this working together. You've heard of reliability control boards, and they've been around for a couple of years, but it's really gone to the next level. And there's a great example for the E2s with the power amplification module. Many of these PAMs, power application modules, are on a single E2. And their design specification was, let's just say, 58 hours. And they were actually producing 60, 62 hours on the wing. Not a problem. It's exceeding its design specifications. But upon closer examination, it wouldn't cause anybody to look at it. Upon closer examination, we found out that one lot of aircraft, they would last 300 hours time on wing. And on a different lot of aircraft, they were getting that just above the design performance. And so we may not have seen that had we not dove down a little bit deeper in here and then discovered some other root cause factors. And now we're able to correct those. And what's more important is the feedback loop that comes into the supply system to be able to adjust our modeling and our demand and our ERPs to be able to not buy that next part because we've just solved the reliability issue. It's that connective tissue.
Yeah, that analysis is really yielding significant benefits. We call it bad actor analysis. So, you know, an aircraft that for some reason is burning up a lot of PAMs, well, why is that? Is that a power distribution issue? Is that some other component that's not filtering power properly? Is it a wiring issue? And we found all those. And it's really a powerful way to use data to point us in the right direction, to make those corrections that have significant impact to the supply chain.
Okay, thanks. Well, so we've kind of explored it a little bit at the fleet, or from the fleet perspective. I want to jump to Admiral Anderson now and just kind of talk about the industrial side. And obviously he's coming in representing NAVC and particularly the shipyard. So, you know, what do the shipyards, as an example, what do they need to get out of NSS-Supply, and how, you've talked a little bit about how you're engaging between NSS Shipyard and NSS-Supply.
Yeah, so I think, you know, fully half of NAVC nearly half are shipyard workers, right? So maximizing the productivity of each, call it a mechanic, each craftsperson on the deck plate in a ship is got to be our objective, right? So they have the paper, they have the material, they have the direction to do what they need to do. So key part of that, you know, germane to this conversation, is the material. And when that material isn't on the shelf in the shipyard, there's a myriad of reasons why. So we have embarked for, you know, my 2+ years here of the whys. Why isn't it there? It's a rotatable pool item. I own a lot of rotatable pool items, so I get to point fingers at myself. But there's many facets to how that works. So I think the best part is the cross-SysCom coordination that we've. It isn't being created. It is being deepened every day. And as I described, you know, so I have an 06 supply officer on my staff, and he is well connected to with a lot of career logisticians inside of Team Sub, who are part of the larger NAVC logistician community, and those things are driven down to. It is day-to-day, stem-to-stern ownership as we design new systems, as we're sustaining the oldest systems, and everything in between of recognizing what the pain parts are going to be. We have obsolescence problems. We have reliability problems, just like the aviation enterprise. So getting to the root cause of those things, I think we're gonna take another step into AI/ML and stop having people figure out what's wrong and have machines exposing to us, hey, you're not seeing the linkage between these things. We got to figure out how to make a machine say that to us. But yeah, there's more behind it, and I think we've got to go dive hard at that.
Okay, all right, great. Another point?
Yeah, it is. And again, just to parlay on that, Ed, it's fantastic. The rotable pools are just a great example. And you know, the artisans that work in those shipyards are extraordinarily vital to the ship repairs and getting those ships out on time. And oftentimes their value was to be on the ship doing things as opposed to back in the shops doing some of the component repairs to some of our components or what's in a rotable pool, for say, because the higher priority was the ship and things like that. So through this, doing a series of ethnographic observations and watching material flows, you know, we found out a number of things. There are some funding misalignment issues. perceived. There are some policy issues that may not help us out as much as we need. And as we started to look at that, we saw, my goodness, a lot of this is fixable if we just refocus and work together across the warfare centers, the shipyards, the Naval Supply Systems Command, because there's a lot of coordination that has to go on. And so simple things like that are starting to now allow us to fix ourselves and to do it at an affordable cost. So before money even leaves the Navy, we have shipyard workers that are already getting paid. We have war center personnel that are getting paid to repair things. We can make minimal investments in small bit piece part support and get that rotable pool in a ready for issue status so that the next submarine that needs it, it's available. Simple things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Tony, up to you. Now you've heard all this going back and forth with the on the uniform side of the table here, and so what can we learn from somebody as big as GE Aviation in terms of lessons and how NSS can partner better for contracting and minimizing avoiding obsolescence and just pushing long-term readiness outcomes. So
Yeah. So thanks for the question. It's a great question. We had a very energetic discussion this morning with Admiral Stamatopoulos about how can we, what are some ideas we have in terms of how to partner going forward. And frankly, our teams have spent a fair amount of time and frankly, a fair amount of money trying to come up with the things that, as we talked about this morning, help the entire enterprise, not just the GE part of the process, but the entire enterprise. And I'll give you a couple of very specific examples. For example, we have spent a fair amount of time developing a new tool that we call Brilliant Pricing. And Brilliant Pricing is really targeted at streamlining the TINA cost certification process. And I don't know if anybody here thinks that process has an opportunity to get better, but we think there's an opportunity there. This is a digital tool. We've used GE dollars to invest, to come up with the capability. We think it can reduce the contracting cycle by as much as 85%. We've run a number of pilots, including with the Navy on the 414. We think the process and the tool is even more transparent than the paper or data we currently provide, and just as auditable. So a huge opportunity. Now, obviously, there's a cultural and other kind of policy changes that will need to go in place in order to take advantage of it, but something that we're working in partnership with the Air Force and the Navy to try to get in place. Another example, additive manufacturing. Now, everybody talks about additive. From our perspective, we've invested over $1 billion in an additive, and we've learned a lot. And one of the things we've learned is not just about printing the parts. I mean, you've got to, once you print the parts, you actually have to inspect the quality of the parts. You have to post-process the parts. You also have to figure out how to certify the parts. I mean, there's just a lot to additive manufacturing. But we have certified parts in our commercial business, flying on commercial airlines today, and we're working very closely with the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force to leverage what we've learned. Another great opportunity, I think, for us to partner, leverage, and then it has the potential to reduce lead times, reduce complexity in parts, as well as increase capability in the parts. Now, last thing I say is we love our business. It's a big business, but it's a commercial business. 80% of this business is in support of commercial airlines, airline customers, and then we have this really great military business. On the commercial side of the business, we have a huge portfolio of commercial service agreements, and there are clearly some best practices that our commercial teammates do that we can leverage and support our military products. We've leveraged some of it already with the Royal Australian Air Force on their 404s and 414s. We've seen 20% reduction in costs, or 20% reduction in time on wing, and we think there's clear opportunity to leverage it, and we spoke a little bit about that this morning also. So again, I think there's lots of different places we can partner and leverage each other's strengths. So thanks for the question.
Appreciate your perspective there. Thanks. So I'm going to jump to a question from the audience here that I think is very important. So how or is the Navy planning to integrate Marine Corps ground supply chains to achieve a true naval supply chain across technology, across processes, across operational level? And will your C-suite absorb the Marine Corps supply chain C-suite?
I'll take a shot at that.
All right, I thought you would.
Operative word, ground systems. Okay, we are beginning to do that, as Admiral Meyer mentioned, on the Marine Corps aviation side of the house, right? There is a very close symbiotic relationship between Navy Air and Marine Corps Air. We fly from the same ships, platforms, we operate the same. So that's going in the right direction, and we'll continue to see that go. Now, on the ground side of the house, less clear on that space. But again, the Marine Corps is watching what's happening within our P2Ps and our NSS. They're at the table, again, on the aviation side of the house. And as they always do, they learn and adapt and take best practices when they are applicable to them. So fully expect the Marine Corps to continue to become a better Marine Corps through initiatives like this.
All right, great. And okay, so let's get to the meat of it. So this has been going on about 10 months now. And, how's it going? How do you measure progress other than not getting thrown out of the VCNO's office on your monthly updates? And, any near-term highlights to win?
Yeah, sure. So again, as you saw that the pillars that we had up earlier inside there, we've just completed our Wave 1 initiative. Each wave goes for about 3 months. And now that's in a sustainment mode. So again, those waves don't just go away. It's a new way of doing business. And we continue to sustain them moving forward, understanding that we've made some step change increases in our business processes. One that we're very proud of is along our Navy working capital effort, which is, again, that financial engine that funds our procurement for our spares and our repairs that are out there. And through incorporating what we call a cash war room, we've actually been able to look closer, deeper into our PRs, the things that we have on order, what's going to be delivering, how the environment has changed, and we've been able to make some adjustments to our buys to either delay the delivery of material, to conserve cash, or to be able to adjust quantities down because the demand patterns have changed, to save cash, or really to save obligation authority, which allows us to apply that obligation authority in another higher priority part that needs to be repaired or bought. So there's things that's going on there. Now, we set ourselves a 2-year stretch goal of being able to harvest about $500 million in this space. And that's not just cutting parts, that's again delaying the delivery, adjusting quantities, in some case canceling where it makes sense. We're already about $400 million, and we're not even done with the first year. So again, this just shows us that this is a best practice to be able to further refine our buy and repair decisions and to do it on the fly, because we have a very dynamic environment and we have to be agile enough to change to it. Another big win, we started off in that end-to-end velocity to decrease our repair turnaround times. And some of these numbers are impressive. Again, we've just started this. So on the maritime side of the house, we looked at all of the NINs, the NSNs that we're receiving demands for. We kind of honed on and started with them first. We've identified 400 of those NINs that commercial industry has already pledged, and now we are doing contract modifications to be able to decrease repair turnaround times by 48% on those 400 NINs. Now that's big, and oh, by the way, that's at no cost. So that was just right out of the gate. Now we're going to go to the next level of NINs, which may be a little bit more challenging, and that's where those deeper supplier relationships have to be cultivated. On the aviation side of the house, 568 NINs for 37% reduction in repair turnaround times. Again, that's great, because when you do that, now we can start to make adjustments in our buying models, so that we don't have to go out and buy that next part as quickly as we were in the past, but we can now start to just focus in on the repair of that. So those are two big quick wins that are there. The other big thing is our pricing model. So just as Tony mentioned, pricing is important to industry, cash flow is important. We're taking a cash flow look, and we're also looking at how we do pricing. And that's something that can be complicated. And by taking a cash look at things, we're now able to go in and make some more rational price decisions that will stabilize our working capital fund so that we can capture and recover many of the costs that we hadn't been seeing before because we were looking at it through a non-cash lens. That's a big deal because that means that the buying power of the fleet is going to be more a realistic demand signal, and we're adjusting fleet accounts to be able to accommodate in some cases when prices will rise and other cases when prices will drop because we're just taking a more focused approach. Those are three quick wins just in our phase, our wave one, and those are again just setting conditions, and we're going to continue to see these things grow. Reliability, that is the biggest area. So in the past, the focus has been, hey, let's make the part more reliable so we can save flying hour dollars. Well, there is a cascading effect of many other accounts that will yield benefit from a reliability, to include less OPN8 funding, less investments, less APN6. There's transportation, packaging, there's repair, there's inventory holding costs. There's a number of things that are going to happen, and this is just starting to gain speed. We never looked at it through this lens before. Now we are.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our time, and I think we've gotten a good overview of what this is, what the urgency was for it, and all the way through the, from the stakeholders' perspectives here with industrial and industry and the fleet. And then we just heard about some of the near-term successes and the momentum that's going on. The last question that I'd like to leave with that one of the audience members came up with is, so is this going to be sustained? Everybody always worries about things being personality dependent. We've heard the VCNO mentioned several times here today. So I'd like to just ask each of the panelists as we close, from their experience as senior leaders, what does it take to sustain something like this? And so let's start at the far end there this time, if we could, John. I'm going to put you on the spot one more time there, and then we'll work back across. So any lessons or thoughts you have as far as how do you sustain something like this beyond all of you folks there?
Well, first and foremost, I would offer that change is always a challenging prospect in any organization, whether it's the Navy, aviation, maintenance community. I imagine commercial is the same thing. And it was not an easy journey. The first 2 years of NSSA, there were some resistors out there. Many of us have heard of the frozen middle, and leaders understand that concept. But there is nothing like success to breed success. And when you look at what naval aviation has done, really after year 2, it was almost like a dam burst. And we've seen our mission capability rates jump up dramatically. We're continuing to improve on the FMC rates. There is across the board buy-in. So, I quoted earlier, that which interests my boss fascinates me. I have a vision where it doesn't take VCNO drilling down, that is almost reverse that. It's a self-generated model. I think we're there, and I'm seeing that on our flight lines with the O-level reform, with the way that our maintenance operations center, which is kind of our synchronizing node, works. It is really exciting time for readiness in naval aviation.
That's great. That's great. Ed?
Yeah, I think the very similar thoughts. Nothing gets a workforce more excited than actually seeing a solution being extolled by leadership and grabbed and run with. So, from the NAVSEA enterprise, being able to finish ships out of major availabilities on time, being able to support ships in the sustainment that is our SysCom job, we found a better way to do this. Again, we stole it, but we made it our own, and I think we're seeing the success of that every day. And when we can start measuring days saved on major availabilities instead of days lost, I think that will just cement it, and it is becoming cultural now.
Okay, great. And Tony, you've got lots of change going on in GE Aviation, so how do you keep it going?
Yep. No, look, I'm personally highly encouraged that that we can sustain the transformation that we're driving. I laid out the comprehensive framework in terms of changing our operating system that we put in place, but we're doing a couple of other things very different. One of them is we are now driving much more of an inverted pyramid leadership approach, where we as leaders now recognize and understand that we're here to serve the people who are the closest to the product. And by driving that, I think it'll help stick. Another thing we're doing is something similar to your boots on the ground, Admiral, and that is we are now as leaders required to go to GEMBA. And GEMBA is the actual place where the work is done. I've spent more time in the shop, and we go to GEMBA not to ask questions, not to give direction, but to ask questions, to learn what's working, to learn what's not working, and then to take action items in terms of how we support the people who are actually making the parts and doing the work. And I think the combination of all these give me incredible confidence that I think we're on the right path for something that's sustainable.
Okay. And finally, the supported commander, and from your perspective.
Well, I think we're definitely on a path to sustain this without a doubt, but I tell you, when you look around at commercial industry and the engagements that I've had with senior leaders across the areas in which you work, they're all involved. They raise up their sleeves, they get into the business of running their business. They just don't sit back and watch what happens or wonder what happens. They have to make things happen. And as you saw, Tony showed us in the one slide and how they're embracing the red, going after things to really get to the heart of the performance. That's what we have to do on those of us who run the business of the Navy. And certainly the Naval Supply Systems Command is squarely in that, along with many other of our mission partners. And our business is complex, from a shipyard business, from a warfare center business, FRCs, et cetera. And it takes leaders to get down, get dirty, and create the conditions for the success of their workforces, because it's all about being able to take care of them and support them so we can get the results that we need to give Oscar Mayer the airplanes that he needs to go out to certify, train, and then ultimately take them over the horizon and defend the nation. So I think we're on a great path.
Okay, so what can I say? Strong plan, superb leadership, great industry partnership. I'm excited about this, and I hope you are too. And with that, just let me once again thank our panelists. A round of applause for these folks for taking their time out today.